This has become quite a hot topic lately amongst Nintendo fans, but has been a prevalent debate since the Switch's first year of release. And it is the topic of games being released in a state that leaves multiple people unsatisfied, only for Nintendo to add more to the game via updates, and players and fans have been calling out to Nintendo about the practice and their execution of it. Now, this practice is something many gamers are familiar with, far beyond Nintendo and Nintendo fans specifically. It's something games and companies have been doing for a long while now, for over a decade. Releasing a game in whatever state it's in, complete, mostly finished, marginally finished, or actually unfinished and buggy, and over time, the game receives updates and more content after launch to provide a bigger, better experience, whether via free updates or paid DLC. It's a very common practice among the gaming landscape, from buggy, unfinished games like No Man's Sky or Fallout 76, releasing in unfinished, incomplete, or hardly playable states, and obtaining free updates to add more content over time that provide a more complete game, to games like Fortnite doing the same model, but already being complete from the start and adding more to the gameplay and cosmetics for free to a game many feel and understand is complete, while also giving players options to purchase more content via paid DLC. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Mario Kart 8 on Wii U and now Deluxe, Hyrule Warriors, etc. These games and thousands more going about the method via the DLC route. Extra content added to the game and is meant as basically that. Extra content to a very much complete game and experience. You'll have some games reap its own suspicions and contentions out of how truly complete it feels or its experience provides, pre-updates and post-updates like No Man's Sky, or pre-DLC and post-DLC like Pokemon Sword and Shield, but the general content update model in either scenario is something the industry's embraced and done for a long time now. Many video games, Nintendo and non-Nintendo, do all kinds of updates and content additions post-launch, so it's not even the practice or model itself that's an issue on paper. But with Nintendo as of the Switch, it's become a prevalent talking point amongst consumers with some of Nintendo's first-party releases, specifically games with free updates, adding content later down the line. And on a base level, you think, why wouldn't it be cool for a game to add more content after launch? Conceptually, it's sound, but again, examples like No Man's Sky, Battlefield 2042, or Cyberpunk 2077, there were games launching in buggy or unfinished states, lacking that functional polish and lackluster experience and overall content provision to play and feel like a normal game, or lacking specific features and modes and such that feel they should have come with the base game, feeling like they were lacking in proper content compared to previous iterations of that series, or feeling like the experience was incomplete or lackluster for a variety of reasons, and the idea of having that content come via updates to provide that complete experience can come off as cheap and haphazard, when that time could have been spent adding those features in the game before launching it in the state it's in at full price, even at the expense of pushing that game back to a later date, to provide that more complete package and fulfilling experience than having to experience it in a less satisfying state for $60 more often than not, and having to wait months or years for the game to eventually be great, playable, have those features and details past games didn't, struggling and incorporating, or feel well worth the purchase much longer after the fact. But you also have cases like Super Mario Maker's 1 and 2 or Super Mario Odyssey that, whether big or small content updates, you could 100% distinguish the updates in question were proper additions adding to an already complete package, as plenty felt and understood Mario Maker 1 and 2 and Super Mario Odyssey were very much full, complete and satisfactory games in multiple ways for the vast majority of consumers. There are two sides to the practice itself, and many games have followed golden examples while many others followed much more poorly by comparison. How this circles back to Nintendo's first party specifically is plenty of people brought this up when talking about some of Nintendo's games, particularly Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Golf Super Rush, Kirby Star Allies, and Nintendo Switch Sports. There are some other games I'll mention too, like ARMS and Splatoon, that adopt the same model, but the catalyst for this video is that Mario Strikers Battle League is also presumed to be adopting the same model for itself. As of the making of this video, Battle League doesn't come out for another month, and we just got a Japanese overview trailer showing off more about the game as we get closer to release, and between what the game has shown off, and especially in regards to the character roster, many including me are going with the assumption that that release now and update slash fix later approach is being applied to Mario Strikers as it has with the other Mario Sports titles on Switch and the other games I mentioned. It's currently all speculatory and conjecture. Nothing about it has been confirmed for Battle League yet, and many are expressing plenty of concerns and worries if Battle League does adopt this model based on the previous examples listed. I'll speak my 2 cents on the matter and go into detail on the general model and execution of it with Nintendo specifically, the general sphere of the release it now and fix or add to it later approach. But Nintendo Switch Sports and Mario Strikers particularly sparked this debate all over again the past week, and I want to provide my perspective on that for a moment, at least with Mario Strikers. So I've seen plenty claim Strikers basically looks unfinished, largely around that assumption it's going with the update model alongside that underwhelming character roster. Not just claims of the roster being unfinished or lackluster, but also the game itself and lacking in overall content. And even across 2 videos spanning almost 50 minutes between both I made, you guys already know how excited I am about Battle League, even with the lackluster looking roster, assuming Daisy's not in it, alongside other characters and or if there aren't unlockable characters. As of this moment, I don't need to mention much about how or why the roster of characters looks or feels incomplete or underwhelming. Not only did I already do so, even amidst my genuine anticipation and excitement for Battle League, that specific stance very much seems to be the general consensus for most Nintendo fans regarding Battle League. A lot of people are still eager to try the game and such, but the roster being that small and basic is a major turnoff for those same people, and then some still. I'm still very much looking forward to Battle League, but I do agree, and we could talk about the roster seeming underwhelming all day, but again, people are claiming the general game itself will be lackluster or quote-unquote unfinished based off that, and in my own opinion, I very much disagree with the idea Battle League looks or feels unfinished thus far, or at the very least, I feel it's premature to lump Mario Strikers into the category of being or feeling unfinished. Content-wise, if you played either GameCube Strikers or Strikers Charged, both those games weren't exactly the most diverse or grandiose in terms of content and modes it provided. The GCN one had local/normal play, Cup and Super Cup battles, which was that game's campaign basically, and was not long at all. A tutorial mode, this tourney bracket styled mode called Custom Battles, and that's about it. Charged didn't have custom battles, but it basically had all of this as well, local/normal play, Road to Striker Cup being its campaign, and a tutorial mode. But it also had a challenge mode and online play. Both titles were packaged at $60 full price, and those games long before Battle League offered satisfactory and memorable experience based purely from the gameplay and presentation the series offered, in spite of how much content both games provided in the grand scheme. Challenge mode's the one thing that's setting Charged up a little higher by comparison, but not only is challenge mode not a long or deep extra mode in the game, and isn't commonly remarked when people mention either Striker's game, but even beyond it, both games effectively have the same amount of content in modes and options. It's just Charged had a wider array of characters and fields. So far, Battle League by comparison has local and online play, with some layers looking at the ranking system and how clubs function, plenty of time and design dedicated to the gear, customizable fields that can be upgraded, and that's it so far. All it needs to stand side by side with the first 2 games in terms of content depth and overall package quality is literally just a campaign, which I get Daisy's supposed absence is very standout, but none, if not barely any Mario Sports games went without a campaign of some sort, and both Strikers campaigns were not long nor deep and complex by any means at all. Alongside, both games were packaged and sold full price as well, and still revered as amazing and quality standout Mario Sports titles for several reasons beyond just character roster. And even then, once again, Mario Strikers' quality breathed and died by its gameplay and presentation above everything else, something the vast majority of people, including me, agree Battle League is accomplishing in spades and flying colors. We've yet to see whether it'll hold a campaign or not. I sincerely doubt it won't go without some kind of campaign, but whether or not it comes with such, the amount of content that's there now is hardly that far off in terms of what the standards always were for Strikers. A campaign literally being all it needs to meet those. Yes, the roster looks and feels very lacking based on the 10 characters we do know are in the game, and if this were specifically on the roster, then I'd agree and call that specifically lackluster or incomplete. But to call the game itself unfinished or incomplete a month before it comes out for us to really say for certain is absolute hyperbole to me. I'd at least want to see what else is left for the game, and if anything else will come. Forget how much polish, care, and passion Next Level Games is putting into the gameplay looking as solid and fun as it does thus far, and especially the presentation, i.e. the animations, expressions, and charm on all the characters, the style, the graphics, the aggressive nature, etc. I personally can't call it unfinished or anything of that nature outside the roster itself, as that definitely muddies intentions based on who's saying and calling it such, especially when this does not look like an unfinished game whatsoever. Yes, another mission mode would be awesome, and I hope there is some campaign of some kind as well as a bigger roster at any point of the game's life. Wanting more out of a series you really love is 100% worth expressing and feeling, regardless of how wonderful or disappointing a new installment may seem for XYZ. But Battle League standards and overall quality, even before it's out yet, look to be either just shy of or on par with the rest of the series in every other aspect. It could use a bigger roster. Strikers as a series benefits harder than most Mario spin-off series from having a lot of character diversity between options and giving even more characters life, expression, and character, but I definitely cannot claim it looks or feels like an unpolished game outside that until it comes out for me to really see. I feel like plenty of people calling it unfinished forgot how much content is actually in either Strikers games, especially compared to other Mario sports and spin-offs. Topped with again the great presentation and fun-looking gameplay, that lumping that into the negative aspect of the model is very premature to me, especially when we don't even have official confirmation it'll have that model. And that aspect is the key with this discussion and model, that difference between unfinished and a lack of content. In Battle League's case, the lack of an enticing roster is the only notable flaw that game seems to possess, and is a valid and worthwhile criticism to make. But the idea of that and other games basically being quote-unquote unfinished, unpolished, or incomplete is what muddied the entire discussion surrounding some of these games and the model itself. Because multiple Nintendo games adopt this model and is a common practice, but it's a practice that hasn't always reaped the most positive reception or most beneficial results in terms of execution. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, for example, had paid DLC and extra characters combined with their new stages and music, and separately some Mii costumes, but it also adopted the free update model as well for a bit, adding Home Run Contest and Stage Builder, two modes that were staples to the Smash series since Brawl, and they got added later via free updates when those were modes always in the base game in both Brawl and Smash for 3DS and Wii U. And that's not accounting Ultimate's omission of a target mode of some kind. But even with that, barely anyone claimed Ultimate for being an incomplete game or an unfinished product. Not with how much polish and care was put into the game, and especially in regards to the content it already had. The massive roster of characters, the even more massive stage selection, the number of items, music, the single-player campaign present that the previous game lacked, some of the side content it had like Classic Mode and Multi-Man Smash, etc. Even with the updates, that was hardly, if at all, a major discussion for most Smash fans, even casual fans. Some did, and with some valid reason, but most didn't. So I feel like the whole debate and connotation with the claim of being unfinished got exaggerated in some cases, but that's primarily because the experiences for some of these games were lackluster and underwhelming for plenty of people. There are multiple cases where this model wasn't handled as efficiently as plenty would have hoped, and now we're seeing more cases of fans dreading whenever Nintendo does the free update model as a result. Mario Tennis Aces, for example, launched with generally good reception and sold very well for the series, but was met with plenty of critiques regarding the underwhelming single-player mode and variety in overall content. Over time, it received updates, greatly expanding on its character roster and adding more additions to its single-player content in general. Every couple months, it got some more modes and gameplay tweaks, and there was a new playable character basically every month. After the 2.2.0 update, you could select courts you wanted instead of it being random during free play, for instance, and it got support for over an extra year after launch. But there were still elements of the game feeling underwhelming in some of its content, or at the very least its single-player campaign and single-player modes, and Mario Tennis is one of those Mario series known for having plenty of content and stuff to do alongside having solid gameplay and a big roster. It also didn't help much too, people weren't a fan of having to wait every couple months for the game after launch to gradually feel more and more fulfilling and worth the fulfilling or satisfying experience or the $60. Mario Golf Super Rush dealt with a similar case, but with worse results compared to Tennis. Out of the gate, its gameplay was regarded as anywhere between good to decent, but was also met with contentions regarding single-player campaign, the number of courses, overall content and modes, lacking in online features like ranked play, and felt like a subpar Mario Golf game for a lot of people compared to past iterations like the N64 one or Toadstool Tour. It received free updates and added more characters like Toadette, Ninja, Wiggler and such, and a couple more fields alongside some extra features and modes and whatnot, but not only did the length of Golf's updates last much shorter than Tennis Aces' for only 5 months, they hardly did much in aiding the game's press and buzz. Barely anyone was talking about the game the first or second week after it launched, which wasn't the case for Tennis Aces. Kirby's Star Allies is another similar scenario with the model, reaping mixed reception. Star Allies was regarded as a good game even before the updates, but some note it as this weird middle ground of an anniversary game, not labeled as such, being a safe game that felt a little lackluster and by the books compared to past Kirby games, on top of being the first Kirby game in the series worth full price at that point. But come later updates, it added a bunch of new characters, modes, levels and such, to where many more people enjoyed the game significantly more and feel it's a worthwhile experience now. But even with that, some marked how annoying it is for consumers to basically be forced to wait several months to a year for that experience to be worth the $60 or to be met with that satisfaction most wanted when they bought it as is, in spite of the shift in perspective and reception the game got post-updates. Some did feel the game would have benefited more had it been pushed back for that extra content to be in the game as the base and full package. ARMS is a very similar case with Kirby in that regard. Another game regarded as solid and good in gameplay, characters, and concept, and sold very well, but was lacking in single-player content and modes, but later updates would see to add more characters, stages, modes, features, and lore to the series and make the game and experience more fleshed out and more satisfying than how it was at launch. But similar to Mario Golf, outside hardcore ARMS fans, hardly many talked about the extra updates and content ARMS got beyond some of the new characters, and it didn't do a whole lot to positively remind people and reflect on the game. It kind of decimated that game's press and longevity, and quote-unquote killed it in the long haul for a ton of people. And recently, Nintendo Switch Sports just released and is being met with similar backlash and criticism as these games. Being a continuation of the Wii Sports brand, it had 2 sports from the first remade, 1 from Wii Sports Resort remade, and 3 new ones in the game, and Golf coming in an update later. But between Golf being a base sport and both Wii Sports titles being added later, the game itself being full price for a simple casual sports game, when the original Wii Sports was a pack-in for the Wii, and both games are very similar in scope, content, and appeal, and Resort was full price but with more than double the content and features than the first title, plenty feel Nintendo Switch Sports is fumbling the bag and delivering an average or mediocre experience that shouldn't have been $60, nor would benefit much from the update model even at the rate it's going. So these are just some flawed, more infamous examples Nintendo went about updating these games, and adding more to them plenty of fans mark and use as precedent whenever more games do this. However, Nintendo still has other games and titles they use this model towards, and it pans out better. Again, Super Mario Odyssey with the costumes and Luigi's Balloon World, or the Mario Maker games with all the different elements and modes and such added to both titles. Another noteworthy example, Splatoons 1 and 2. Splatoon 1 saw frequent updates and adjustments to the gameplay every couple weeks or so, with every few months adding more modes, weapons, outfit changes, etc. Splatoon 2 saw the same. Plenty of adjustments every couple weeks, and anywhere from 1 to 3 months at a time, major content updates with new modes, additions to Salmon Run, new costumes, weapons, tweaks, etc. for effectively 2 years, and both games were very well received out of the gate and regarded as fun, enjoyable, and fulfilling experiences before and after the updates, with Splatoon 2 adding even more with the updates it got and DLC with Octo expansion. Between these games and some of the examples I listed before talking about Strikers, you can tell there are varying degrees of success and failures with this model, and pros and cons within all of those cases with this model and structure for adding more to the game. Some games adding too little extra content over the span of several months at a time, feeling it's taking too long, or feeling cheated out that simple features or staple mechanics and modes and stuff past games had being added much later dampens the initial experience and contends to the value of the product in that moment and how good that game is, while other games released updates at the same rate but with much more content providing a more fleshed out, additive, and worthwhile experience. Some games like Smash, Splatoon, Mario Kart, Mario Maker, and many more being and feeling very satisfactory and complete at the start, but having those updates and free or paid DLC genuinely feel like extras, like it's bonus content added to a package many love and enjoy for several reasons, while other games like Mario Golf, Nintendo Switch Sports, even Animal Crossing, and many others utilize this model to where many felt it was a means to pump out the game in a less than ideal state to get it out to the market and gear it up to the standards most expect at a later time, which is causing contentions towards the value and overall experience of these and a bunch of other games I didn't even mention. And I think the core of the matter with this model that plenty don't like is some of these games are in some way, if not considerably or wholly, at least in some cases, but at least in some way, relying on that future content and updates to become worth the $60, to become standout and great games, and to provide that fulfilling experience and packed a game many are content with and can enjoy specifically much later down the road rather than when they release it. It's the fact you, as the consumer, are basically gambling on whether a game's worth it or not based on how much extra content comes later, whether free or paid for, and you never truly know how long that game gets supported for after launch, nor how substantial that added content will be to say whether it's worth the full price to buy when the whole purpose of marketing and good PR is getting you to buy, play, and enjoy that game the minute they announce it and the day it comes out. Millions of games for the longest time, and many still today, are releasing in finished and complete states once, and that's effectively it. You've gotten and are still getting many games with all kinds of gameplay and content at many prices, some better, others worse, providing that amazing and fulfilling experience out of the gate with no updates needed or updates feeling completely supplementary to the core experience and solely add to the base core experience rather than mandatory for that definitive and worthwhile experience of the game, and making the base game feel incomplete or haphazard. And from that core, I feel like it's become muddied by some fans calling some of these games pre and post updates unfinished or unpolished, which I still think to some length is hyperbolic. Personally speaking, if I were looking at a game like No Man's Sky, Fallout 76, Sonic 06 or whatever, games actually unpolished, missing plenty of features, modes and such the game promised to have, and is a barely functioning game if at all, then 100% I can see, call, and validate easily how unfinished it actually is. But I feel unfinished or whatever is being conflated with some of these games when it usually stems from just a lack in content and a lackluster experience in general. Kirby Star Allies felt safe and subpar despite being a fine game, but added plenty to it after the fact and made the game more fun and worth going back to. Mario Tennis was the same in this regard to a slightly lesser extent. ARMS was the same for that. Animal Crossing is too. Like, it's become more of a buzzword calling any game using this model, whether for better or worse, finished, unfinished, whatever, when the vast majority of the games I listed off, at least the Nintendo ones, are fundamentally finished from a functional and design standpoint the vast majority of the time. Mario Golf and Tennis, those games lacked in content and features and such, but it definitely played very well, very solidly and fun. It largely did just boil down to that lack in content, that lackluster experience, feeling like the game could have benefited better, executing some modes and ideas better, while adding more to them. Nintendo Switch Sports is completely functional and has slightly more than enough of what the first game established that most casual gamers recognize. It's just, again, contentions to the overall content when looking at what Wii Sports Resort had and how much Switch Sports costs comparatively to both titles. Like, that line between what's an unfinished or finished product is getting all kinds of obfuscated over just not having specific types of modes and content people expect from these titles. And to me, that should be emphasized and recontextualized better. I feel like it's affecting many people's perspective on game development and the quality and worth of these games before and after the fact in a more surface level way than it actually is. But also, I do feel that lack of content and delivering a lackluster product and using the update model to rectify that over time is a delicate approach that has often been executed in more flawed ways than efficient and successful ways. It does help. It literally adds those features people want out of a game, and then some, but not only do sometimes some games don't even do that with that model in mind, it's the fact you're relying on the chance that maybe the game will get better later, maybe what you're paying and spending on will be worth it, and if not, maybe much later. It's the same issue plenty had with Nintendo Switch Online's expansion pack. It's that chance chance that maybe it'll be worth it over time. Maybe we'll get N64 games, which took 5 years to get to that point. Maybe that library will get significantly bigger. Maybe we'll get GBA games and other systems and whatnot. It's that idea and hope rather than seeing that satisfying product in its full confirmed form at the start. Something many games have done, successfully marketed, made work out for them in many ways, and reap many benefits while also providing said fulfilling experience and purchase. Millions want that instant gratification. There's a big social aspect and longevity to these games that depend on how they function and release the day of. It's also marketing 101 and how a game leaves a lasting impression from its first impression than a later one. Many more people will just want that good experience once they buy the game, not having to wait more months when the game they want is out and bought and spent on, and not knowing how long that support and extra content will last, nor how substantial and fulfilling it will make the game. It's a risk solely on the consumer's part, and is something plenty look down upon when most companies do it. It's not just a Nintendo thing in the grand scheme. And with the way Nintendo does it, it worked out in Splatoon's case based on not just the execution of that game's content and updates, but also Splatoon's nature of being this multiplayer game, and it being a game already built and designed with all these modes, gameplay features, and foundations. Many enjoyed and got behind within the first month of both titles' releases, and lasted for a good while and longer with the updates coming at an efficient enough time and rate, while games like Mario Tennis, Golf, ARMS, currently Nintendo Switch Sports, Kirby and such suffered from that model, either just being lackluster out of the gate, losing that interest and engagement from pre-release, and hurting their respective identities and appeals long-term, even when you could justify their overall quality or not now. It could just be Nintendo's way of approaching that live service angle, not to the same length and depth as Overwatch or Fortnite and such, but that's their market. That's how a good chunk of their first parties and many popular big titles, single or multiplayer, are operating right now, and that's how Nintendo's approaching that model, or Nintendo wants to keep making new games, so this is their way of delivering that model and releasing some of these games at ideal times and dates while still having resources, time, space, and development for future projects and fill in some of the blanks on the released games later. It could be that, maybe a mix of both of these. I don't work at Nintendo, nor am I a higher ranked executive, so I couldn't say, but I do believe it's a model that works and is effective, but I believe really depends on both how satisfactory that game is once you release it for people to maintain that interest, and how substantial those updates are alongside that rate of update releases to really benefit the game in question. Splatoon had many smaller gameplay adjustments added after a great game with enough satisfactory content to satiate the majority from start to finish, and some of those extra modes and paid DLC added that much more positive press and longevity to what's effectively one of Nintendo's most absolutely lucrative IPs now. Games like Mario Maker, designed to last a long time, based on its billions of combinations and ideas for Mario levels across multiple styles, and adding more options and world makers and elements soon after it came out, did work for that game too. And smaller stuff like Odyssey's Balloon World worked for a good month or two, given Odyssey's a single-player game and an already fulfilling Mario adventure, but it was a novel yet addicting mode to an already polished and complete experience. Same case for Smash with Home Run Contest and Stage Builder being added later, or the paid DLC model like Smash Ultimate's characters, or Mario Kart 8 with its original DLC on Wii U, and again with the Booster Course Pass, adding substantial content to games designed to last forever, and were already created with plenty of quality, modes, features, gameplay, and such for people to consistently talk about it still years later. It's not a model that can just work for any game, and I can see why plenty groan whenever Nintendo tries it with more of their games, especially when they end up launching with valid critiques present within their gameplay, overall content, etc., even when the updates add enough to the games like Kirby Star Allies or ARMS to justify their price point or their overall quality now. If they and other companies want that model to work out for them and consumers, they effectively have to release a good enough product out of the gate with little qualms consumers had to take the update model solidly, because even if the eventual updates end up making the game really good, unless they're actually super substantial, like No Man's Sky for example, it's not going to magically re-spark sales and talks surrounding that game by a considerable margin, and most impressions and opinions on the game will remain the same from before the updates came. Again, it's a delicate model I think only applies based on the game's initial quality, when those updates roll out, and what they add to the game that impact its overall quality and longevity to determine how effective and worth the model is. But it is a model that's become conflated and a hot topic amongst Nintendo fans that I figured it'd be worth talking about. It's a model the entire gaming landscape's familiar with, not even just a Nintendo thing, so you could apply this to a bunch of other games and series and companies beyond Nintendo here. But I'm a Nintendo channel, the channel's named after Mario and themed after him, Smash and such, so focusing on the Nintendo side of it's my bread and butter, and why it's focused there than the broad spectrum more, but that broad spectrum can still be applied to this discussion all the same. That's my 2 cents on the matter. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hopefully this was entertaining to you at all or cathartic. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and I've got plenty more content revolving around Nintendo and Nintendo games planned across more discussions, analyses, gameplays, and more, so look forward to those. Otherwise, have a happy Mother's Day to you and all you moms out there. Enjoy your week, stay safe, and stay super.
Yo, hey, 妹妹，嘿，我来呀！共和大泡泡呀！拉面，嘿，来面，排个面，共和再见呀！哈哈，拉面，上手面，谢谢。